Welcome into Illini Cast. This is Illini Cast, part of the Armchair Illini Network, and Sonny and I are excited to have you along for tonight's ride. And we're going to talk about that 2024-2025 season that just ended for the Illini, and a little bit about the defections that the Illini have had and possible additions. It's going to be a great episode. And Sonny, how are things going?
I thought once we hit the off season, we get to relax a little bit, but not so much. I feel like it's hard to believe like that Big Ten tournament was just 3 weeks ago, and again, it's constant news with the Illini Nation, and just having fun with it.
I mean, college basketball right now is at a weird point, I feel
Yeah,
like, because you have teams that are going into the Final Four that are kind of over recruiting guys that they already have on their roster. You have guys probably plotting their next move that are currently in the Final Four. And it's just a world of chaos that I kind of mentioned this in a short video that I did on Atlanticast. I had to stop and pull over when Morez Johnson entered the transfer portal, which we'll get to. But overall, it feels like something has got to change in the world of college basketball where there's got to be multi-year contracts, because I don't feel like fans who are donating a lot of money, actually, like, this is not just the mega donors. This is guys like you and I down donating $250 just to get a good seat selection
yeah.
in State Farm Center and around the college basketball landscape. And I feel like these fans are going to be dried up pretty soon if this is the way that college sports are going to continue.
It's just tough, Like college has always been about the name in front of the jersey, but I mean, you felt that you kind of bonded with the names on the back of the jerseys for just a couple seasons, right? These kids would be growing. You'd see them come in as 17, 18 years old, and you'd see them leave as adults, but that's just gone. And, it's tough. I think it's tougher for us as Illinois fans, because I'm sure we're going to talk about this with just the constant roster turnover. But what I keep trying to tell all Illini fans out there is like it's not just us. It may be a little bit more extreme with us, or given the circumstances over the last couple of years, but yeah, it's just tough. Football, yeah, you at least have that rule where they've got to be 3 years away from high school to be able to enter the NBA draft, so you can grow close to some of these players. In basketball, it's none of that. It's so much so like when a season ends, you have to wait for a declaration, an announcement of the player coming back, which is just
Yeah, we're going to get to that shortly with a guy like Ty Rogers and talk about his return to the Illini, where he really never entered the transfer portal. It just became the expectation, pardon me, with his red shirt throughout this season. But it is a little bit like you don't get the full model of the player. You see the player uh, have all their freshman struggles sometimes, or their sophomore struggles, and you never get to see the benefit. It's always another school that gets to see the benefit. It truly feels like in the world of college basketball, and that kind of rubs fans the wrong way. There are the exceptions of Will Riley and Casper's. I know Illini fans didn't really get to see the full. Gamut of what they can do. They'll see it on their various professional basketball networks and NBC and ESPN, but they don't get to see it in the Illini. I think it's a outfit like Morez Johnson that you just feel like, man, what could have been in the world of Illini Nation. He's the typical 3-year player that you think is like Michigan State and Tom Izzo that they've had year in and year out, and Illinois doesn't really get to see that. But we'll get to that a little bit later. But I want to talk about what this season truly meant for the Illini. I asked Alex from Armchair Illini to grade the regular season. Now that you know what the full scope of this season looked like, what is your grade, Sonny, for the Illini this year?
I gave them. So for me, meeting standards was B minus. Okay, and in my season grade episode of Locked On Illini, that's exactly what I gave them. For me, it's um, context matters, right? And Brad Underwood absolutely had to replace 10 guys on this roster this past season. We had to deal with sickness, we had to deal with injuries, and I think that Austin, if we had been told the night before the Eastern Illinois game, that all of that would have happened. And the end result of the season would have been 22 wins, 12 Big Ten wins, making the NCAA tournament. I think we would have probably taken it. I'm not going to grade too much better than that because I don't think they exceeded expectations as a team overall, much more than a B minus. But I know a lot of people out there are going to say C or D just because we didn't get to the level we got last year. But I don't think this team really had much of a chance to equal what they had last year. This was supposed to be a down year, and it technically was. And if a down year is 22 wins, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with a C plus, and in this occasion, C's get degrees for the Illini. Brad Underwood really established the expectations of this roster pretty quickly. He wasn't that fiery Brad Underwood. He wasn't doing fart noises with his mouth after some performances that, quite frankly, deserved that fart noise machine that Brad Underwood had a couple years ago. I think Brad knew the youth of this roster. He knew the mental capacity that this team had. And I don't think making freshmen feel worse than they already feel was the answer. And that's why you didn't see the fiery Brad Underwood. I missed it in all honesty though. Because you want that as a fan. You want him to be like, what the hell is Kasparis doing with these passes? What is Ben Hummerkaus doing on defense? He was very just like, we're gonna work on it. We're gonna work on it, guys. We're working on it. This has been a weird season with sickness and injuries, and he really just kind of took the mold of a grandpa in a
Mhm.
way
Yeah.
of this team instead of Daddy Brad that Jeff Goodman and crew like to say. I think he truly was like a grandpa this season, and I don't think that's a good thing. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing either. It just kind of what he felt like needed to be done, and that means going into the media room, not screaming and yelling and hooping and hollering. So I have to go with C plus, just because yes, there was a lot of instances of where you knew the talent of this team was better than what they were showcasing on the court, regardless of the injuries. Kasper Skiakichonis is way more talented than having 8 turnovers and a half, like he had at some occasions. You knew that Ben Hummerkaus is a better shooter than what he showcased in the Illini uniform. And the list goes on of guys that didn't perform. Trey White, regardless of the coaching uh, ill will toward him at parts of the season, he did not perform that well at times this season. So I truly think that if this team played to their hype and the expectations that they kind of have for themselves, that this team would have had a double bye in the Big Ten and maybe even a higher seed in this NCAA. Not that it truly would have mattered with all number one seeds heading to the Final Four. It truly felt like a chalky year this year, but at least I think you would have got to a Sweet 16 instead of this up and down chaos. Don't know what you're going to get, the Jekyll and Hyde. I think that was the most annoying factor for me this season was just how inconsistent they were. And obviously, you can't have much better than a C plus whenever you have the worst defeat in program history. I don't care who the program you're going up is against. It just you can't have those type of losses.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, but for me, it's like you're describing a roller coaster of a season, and I do think with the complete reset we did with this roster, and when you incorporate injuries and people getting sick, and let's be honest, misfires on talent evaluations on Ben Hummerkaus and Kerry Booth, uh, I kind of do factor in the up and down season. Now, like if we were running everyone back next year, which obviously we're not. We're going to talk about in a little bit. But if this was a veteran team that's worn the blue and orange for a couple seasons, then I would be like, yeah, I agree with you that you can't have these wild inconsistencies. But I think that with the circumstances that we had with this basketball team, I'm not exactly that shocked that the season had the highs that it had and the lows that it had.
All right, Sonny, what is your most positive thing you saw from this Illini basketball season? Let's just take it for who was on the team at the time, nothing about what could happen or what has happened in the offseason.
I think this is actually a clear cut answer for me, and it's the development of the young guys that we had, and just kind of establishing that European pipeline. You and I talked about this kind of in the preview. I thought this was going to be very, very important for Brad. The development of KJ and Will Riley. We wanted them to have good seasons, and they had good seasons. good as some people want them to be. We're not sure, but moving forward, it's obvious with the price tags that are going around for a lot of the star college basketball players. Uh, there's a market inefficiency going out and grabbing the top talent in Europe. And Brad and Jeff Alexander, and not necessarily Europe, but Orlando Antigua internationally at least, they've started to build that pipeline. And I do think that the success that KJ did have, the success that Tomislav had this season in an Illini uniform, is going to help bring that future talent into Champaign, because it's going to, like, that's why we want Kasparas drafted as high as possible. If he, whether he goes fifth, sixth, Will Riley, of course, we want him back in Champaign next year. But if he doesn't, if he gets drafted in the top 20, that's a good thing. Tomislav, who knows? His brother might be joining him here. We want to establish those relationships with those, the players out there, because they don't know what Illinois is, but at the same time, they don't necessarily know what Kentucky is either. So the name brand, the blue blood, doesn't matter to them as much as just, hey, a kid like Dame Sar, he played with Kasparas, and so he knows Kasparas. Kasparas goes to Illinois, he can vouch for the program, and Dame all of a sudden is more open-minded to coming here because he knows he's going to be treated well. So for me, that was one of the top priorities I had coming into the season, and I do think that Illinois passed the grade on that one.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, they truly showcased what could be possible. And I think it's been a while that Illinois has basically developed a pipeline. Chicago was always a hit or miss entity. I truly think with the performance that Tomislav had and Kaspar's had, I feel like they truly opened a door, and where Sar can really think that he can come. We'll see if he's going to be almost too good, where the NBA draft might be a possibility for him even at this stage of his life. So I think that's something to watch out for whenever you're trying to scope out the next European sensation, because the European sensation might just be, in fact, too good for college basketball. But I think my positive of this season, it's kind of twofold. Number one is the leadership of Kylan Boswell developing in front of our eyes. I think that's a vital part for what could take place next season, where you have some everyday guys coming back, and including Ty Rogers now, which we'll get to in a little bit. But I truly think Kylan and his ability to get to the hole, he was missing a lot of bunnies early in the season, but he kind of cleaned that up at the very end of the year, and his shooting ability improved throughout the season. So I think Kylan's leadership and just knowing the Brad Underwood expectation is going to be huge for this team moving forward. And then you kind of alluded to it with the development of young guys, and I I know he's not in a Illini uniform anymore, but Morez Johnson was an overwhelming positive this season for the Illini. Before the wrist injury, he was amazing. The injury happened, but then he didn't miss a beat after that, and I truly thought that Illinois had it there on Draymond Green at that point, a guy that's just going to be a MFer in the Big Ten, a guy that other Big Ten fan bases are like, man, we got to go up against this guy again. How many years has he been in the orange and blue? But now that obviously isn't going to happen. But I got to give kudos to the work that Morez Johnson did in the orange and blue this season, even though that is such a bittersweet sentence to say.
Yeah, just gross. Yeah, but again, it's an example of, hey, if you're a young talent, come here. You will be uh, developed. Now, ultimately, we'll see if this coaching decision with Brad, it's going to ultimately work out. I know there's a lot of animosity amongst fans about some of the assistant coaches here, but I think if they get the right talent in here next year, again, they've misfired this past season, and that's Brad's fault. I'm saying it's Brad's fault, but if a guy like the rumor Josh Six comes, Jalen Sellers, guys who can shoot the 3-pointer, and all of a sudden, all those wide open 3-pointers we saw this past season, which just simply the shots didn't go in, do go in next year. Maybe Brad then is kind of vindicated for this 5-out offense that he's trying to run.
Yeah, this 2024-2025 season is done for the Illini. They got eliminated in the round of 32 to Kentucky. I don't have to tell you any of you guys that multiple times, but now it is kind of a time to talk about this off season. And this off season is a big one for the Illini. Once again, Brad Underwood is replacing a lot of guys, but that list kind of got trimmed with the news that Ty Rogers is coming back. Eh, what are your initial thoughts on Ty making his return back to the Illini, and what are your newfound expectations for him?
Huge. I mean, if not for the on the court performance, again, the team needed what Ty Rogers can bring. Right. I talked about this. This team lacked, I felt like, a certain personality last season. They seemed, other people use the word soft. I'm a little hesitant to use that word, but you needed.
I will.
Yeah, sure. There you go. Okay, fine. Dogs. We're watching the NCAA tournament. We see Houston's, the Auburns out there, just guys who are older, mean, and that's what Illinois simply wasn't. They got punched in the face early in the game, and they usually, very rarely, were able to come back. So I think having Ty in that locker room, and let's be honest, when Morez decided he wasn't coming back, again, all the conversations about culture, about what kind of Brad running, players out and roster turnovers came up again. Ty, when everyone thought he was going to leave, deciding to come back, I think kind of in some sort of way vindicated that, it's a personal thing. For Ty, it wasn't that Brad Underwood is a bad coach. I don't like Brad Underwood. Maybe he just, at the time when he decided redshirt, didn't see a fit there. He sees the fit there now, and he wouldn't be coming back if he didn't think that Brad Underwood could develop him and for to be successful on the court.
I mean, sometimes the biggest thing is unanswered prayers in a way, and where it's like, man, I really wish Trey White stayed. Man, I really wish Morez Johnson stayed. You get a big, you get a guy that's so versatile on the defensive side of the ball. You get a guy that's not going to allow some of these Big Ten opponents or some of these big time opponents that you play to just bully you. And I think that's a truly needed thing. You have Kylan and Trey now as your older dudes and guys that I think are not going to be outcompeted. And I think there was a time with these freshmen and some of these guys that Brad brought in that weren't ready for the getting punched in the mouth kind of feel that the Big Ten can bring you, or games against this non-conference. I think some of this non-conference slate did break some of the spirit of this Illini team. Normally, it's the opposite. You play a tough schedule, and it makes you grind to your team. I just think this is a much needed breath of fresh air for Brad Underwood to not have to be the bad guy at all times behind the scenes. He can have Kylan and Ty be like, "Hey, this is how we do things. This is the standard of Illinois basketball." Similar to how Terrence Shannon brought these guys in and Coleman Hawkins a couple seasons ago.
Right, because there was no one to do that this year, right? You had DGL, but DGL didn't play all that often, and obviously he's going to be playing somewhere else outside Champaign. Ty Rogers was that guy, but he was that guy off the bench. And it's hard, as you mentioned, when Terrence Hinton Jr. is putting up 20 a game, working his butt off, being at the gym at 4:30 in the morning or whatever it is every morning, those words you take notice to. Next year, as you mentioned, you're going to have guys, culture guys like Kylan, like Ty Rogers, like Tommy Avicic, hopefully,
Yeah.
coming back. And then, I think that just sets your baseline a little bit, little bit louder. And as you said, you're not always just listening to Brad Underwood. You have guys in the locker room that you can kind of grow and trust to build that culture in that room.
Yeah, Ty was the biggest surprise, but Kylan Boswell posted on social media, I believe. I'm off social media until Lent is over, that he is back. But Tomislav Ivisic is like, I would say 90% coming back, essentially based on the portal edition of his twin brother, Big Z, possibly joining the orange and blue. That would be another transfer addition. But so far, Kylan, Ty, and Tomislav could be back, and then Jake Davis is a guy that could be coming back as well. So it's not the whole roster. You still have some playmakers, some dynamic athletes to bring in to try to turn this into a bigger winner this year. But it's nice to not have the cupboard so dry compared to last offseason.
Exactly right. And it's you have the foundational pieces there, right? I mean, if you have Kylan coming back, if you have a guy like Ty Rogers coming back, if you have a guy like Tomislav Ivisic coming back, you've got three players that could be like contributors to a championship team, right? I do question whether the star is there, and I think we're going to have to find who is going to be that key
Are the
player,
star?
or the, yeah, I mean, you said it. Who's going to be the superstar on next year's team? But again, it's just much easier when you have the foundational pieces there, and you're not recruiting 8, 10 guys.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say this because I despise the man so much, but Arturas Karnisovas
Uh,
said that there's two ways to build a roster in the NBA with a couple of stars or 10 really, really good pieces. And I think this next year's team could be a 10 really good pieces kind of team, especially if the transfer portal shakes out the way that a lot of Atlanta fans want slash kind of expect at this point. There could be some outliers of guys making a last minute decision, but if you add a guy like Dix, you add a guy like Sellers, you add a guy like Big Z in there, and then maybe a guard that can shoot. I know probably all right isn't going to happen, or maybe a Price. I think there are options where there's going to be a lot of dynamic lineups that you can build if you're Brad Underwood, and how this team operates. You could have a Twin Towers look. You could have a small ball look in there with Ty Rogers lining up at the four. There is a lot of great ways that Brad Underwood can dictate the matchups and still not lose that toughness out there, which is a very valuable piece to get what matchup you want, yet maintain the physicality that you need to win, especially in the Big Ten.
and that's why Ty Rogers coming back was so key. I think he gives you some of that flexibility. Yeah, he's 6'6", and supposedly he's been working on skills, but when you don't want to run out the Twin Tower lineup, Ty is also physical enough that he gives you the ability to small ball a little bit, and he can play that, the big game even at his 6'6" stature.
Yeah, I mean, I look at what this team could bring in. Which possible transfer that Illinois has been connected to really makes you the most excited, Sonny?
So, I mean, I know a lot of people disagree with me here, but to me, it really is Josh Dix. Now, I understand he's not the athlete that this team needs. I understand he's not very good defensively, and this team needs to improve defensively. But in some ways, I really do. I believe in what Brad Underwood and arguably Tyler Underwood are trying to build on the offensive end. Just because I'm one of the few college basketball fans who does continue to watch as much NBA as I can when I get a
Mhm.
chance. And that truly is where the game is going. And again, last year, the shots didn't fall. And yes, I agree that I wish that the coaching staff would have maybe made some adjustments quicker, but the system, I think, was correct. You set guys who supposedly can hit 3 pointers and you give them open opportunities. It didn't work. But you know what? Josh Dix would be perfect in that sort of system. Like, he's already proven it at the Big Ten level. It's not a Ben Hummerkow situation where you're hoping everything will translate a level or two up. He's already proven that he can do it in the Big Ten Conference. I just think if this offense is to survive, if it's supposed to do what it's supposed to do, having a guy like Dix there is going to it's your best scenario because he's the guy that would absolutely excel in that offense.
I'm going with Jalen Sellers
Mhm.
because there's a thing that Illinois was missing this year on the offensive side of the ball. That's a guy that can have a defender right his hip and it not matter, drive to the hole and slam it down, or just play with a little bit more verticality. Illinois has not had that, did not have that last year. DGL just does not strong enough to maintain that. You saw that the rest of this team was more of a shooter. Casper's was more of a finesse kind of drive and then dish. Will Riley just did not have the strength to do that. He had some monster slams occasionally, but it wasn't consistent enough to make it a part of this offense. So I think Jalen Sellers' athleticism that he would bring and his also shooting ability as well. Like he was dominant for UCF 2 seasons ago before his back injury. So I think he has the seventh highest total of points in a season by a UCF player. So I think having that kind of athlete would be vital for the Illini, and I think Brad loves to have that dynamic capability. He truly missed that last year. I think he didn't have booty ball that he could rely on. He did not have a driver. I think it's just all it was all or nothing. 3-pointer an offensive rebound or absolutely zilch on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I know people are nervous about the back issues, but supposedly Illinois has really vetted and looked over those medical records. And the last time we recruited a player who has back issues, it turned out okay. He didn't miss any games due to that lingering issue. Of course, I'm talking about Terrence Shannon Jr. So it's like one of those you just got to trust Fletch. If he has looked at the records, if he thinks the back is okay, then I think the back is okay.
All right, let's go through some comments. Sonny Philip asks, "Who is your most surprising portal entrant across college basketball?" I'll go first on this one. To me, I think it's Elliot Cadeau from UNC,
Hmm.
and I think it's because of what that kind of opened up for the Michigan Wolverines. I loved Trey Donaldson's game. I love his speed. I love the way he runs the point guard position. It seems every Big Ten tournament game he was the difference maker on why Michigan won. I think they had a slight. I think they lost out on that trade. So
Right.
I think that was my most surprising, maybe roster transition. I guess not so much portal entrant.
For me, it was a portal entry, Trey Holloman. That exemplifies to me the chaos that is the transfer portal. A culture guy. He was through and through a Spartan. Michigan State, supposedly, that's one program that had a culture that people never left. People never enter the transfer portal. All year long, all I hear is from Purdue fans and Michigan State fans that this doesn't happen to them. And for him to get up and leave, and again, all you had to do was see the reactions of Spartans fans. Look, us as Illinois fans, we get shocked by like what happened with Morez last week, but in the back of our heads, we know this can happen with anybody. I think the Michigan State fans were genuinely shocked and surprised when Holloman did, and then there's two guys immediately after him. So for me, I think that was the one name that when I refreshed my Twitter and I saw his name pop in the transfer portal, I was like, what?
Yeah, Purdue actually had a few guys transfer out of the program as well in the last couple days. So that's a little shocking to me that Matt Painter isn't holding down the fort as he once had the last few years. But I think it's one of those things. The portal comes for everybody. It's not selective. It's going to get you no matter what, no matter who your coach is. Pat OD, thank you for joining us. Again, like, subscribe, and share to the Illini Cast, and also follow Armchair Illini. They have some great written work about the transfer portal, spring football as well. Pat OT said he replaced the entire roster because he was recruiting over guys. So you can't say it was a rebuilding year when you thought they'd do worse. So you're pleasantly surprised they won 22 games, etc. Then he goes on to say he intended on this roster getting this team as far as last year. It was a failure in many ways of a roster construction. You expect to build on an Elite Eight performance the very next year. I will agree a little bit in there, but this is college sports where you don't necessarily get to decide. Yes, like the San Antonio Spurs, if they go to the if they go to the finals, and then the next year they still have Manu Ginobili, Tim Duncan, you're
Right.
not recruiting over those guys. So I think it's a little unfair for Brad, but yet Illinois could have used a guy like Dane Danger this year. Illinois could have used a guy like Coleman Hawkins this year. Could you have got those guys? I don't know. There's also a two-way street. Those guys have to be want to be Illini as well.
So I really enjoy Pat. Pat's a frequent commenter on Locked On Illini too, and I hear this argument a lot. I just don't know if I agree with it. Austin, I want to run a quick exercise with you on this team in the offseason. If Terrence Shannon Jr. wanted to come back, would he have been allowed to come back to the Illini this year?
Uh, Legally?
Yeah, I mean he had one more year of
Oh,
eligibility.
oh, absolutely,
Okay, did they? Yes or no? Try to get Marcus Damask a waiver to come back for one more season.
for sure.
Quincy Guerrier, Justin Harmon. If those two guys wanted to come back to this year's roster, do you think they would have been allowed to come back?
I would have taken Quincy
Mhm.
possibly, and that would have been it. I think
Okay.
Justin, you kind of let roam the streets.
I guess the point I'm trying to say is he didn't recruit over this roster. He would have tried to get a lot of these guys back had he been able to. But they simply just either were too good for the league and or too good for college basketball and are now playing in the league. Well, unfortunately, not playing in the league for Terrence Shannon Jr., but that's a different story. Or they just simply ran out of eligibility. And so in that case, yeah, you did have to completely rebuild. Pat, if this team had Terrence Shannon Jr. and Marcus Domask coming back, then of course I 100% agree with you that a repeat performance, if not past the Elite Eight, should have been the expectation. But it's a brand new team. It's a younger team, and so I don't know if I agree with you, Austin. I forget what your preseason expectation was, but for me, it was literally I think make the Sweet 16. And so yeah,
I
we
had
said
to have a double bye in the Big Ten.
okay, yeah. See, like so, it's just like just short. It's one of those where again they didn't quite. They certainly didn't exceed expectations, but I don't think it's the disaster of a season that a lot of fans think it was.
I mean, Iowa would love to have the Illinois season that they just had year after year after year. And they've kind of fallen off from that ledge. And Illinois, the expectations shift, and that's the good thing that we're where we're at. I mean, it's a good thing, but also it can be a bad thing whenever the team slides just a touch as well.
Exactly right.
Jay says, like having Ty back, yet from his standpoint, I'm a tad confused. Was he promised a starting job? Wasn't he going to be like the sixth or seventh guy this year? What has changed is my question. That's a great question. We don't know what this full roster is going to look like,
Right.
so we don't know what Ty's role is. Like, say they got like this stud from the transfer portal or from Europe that Jeff Alexander has been back channeling from Antarctica or something. Um, but if that's the case, then yeah, Ty's back to being relegated to be a sixth or seventh man. But I think there's a legitimate shot that he plays large minutes. I don't know if his name will be called every night from the State Farm Center, but I think he is going to have major minutes given to him just because of the versatility he brings. If there's a small forward on the opposite team that can do damage, they're going to put Ty on him. If there's a shooting guard that Ty can be put on him. If there's a power forward, Ty can do his best. Like I think there's a lot of defensive vulnerabilities that you can expose. Not like you can expose whenever Ty Rogers is on the court.
It's one of those questions where if Morez was coming back, if Trey White was coming back, and then I think I'd be more worried because then at that point you have three rotational players who you don't necessarily know if they're going to be outside shooters. But if Ty, as of now, is the only guy you're kind of questionable about his 3 point shooting, I think he does so many other things well that he can still play 20, 25 minutes a game. And like I said, what I like about him is the flexibility that he gives you. He can play small lineups, and him and Boswell are going to cause havoc on opposing team guards. Or he can be your big in a big lineup if you want to try to. Or sorry, if he can play your big in a small lineup and play your big, be your big in a small lineup. You guys know what I'm talking about. It's just flexibility that Ty Rogers brings, and I don't think the shooting matters as much. I don't think promises are made because I don't think Brad Underwood makes promises. Like anytime media asks him in the offseason, he says starting lineups don't matter. It's all about the minutes and who ends the game, and I think that's probably the conversation he had with Ty. And let's be honest, Ty Rogers was just redshirted. He had a redshirt season. He had to be convinced to come back. This is a conversation that Brad Underwood had. Like Brad said something that Ty really liked to hear. Otherwise, I don't think Ty Rogers would be coming to Champaign.
I mean, the onus was on Brad Underwood to make this happen because you saw the blueprint with Sincere Harris. Like that's how you. That is definitely how you leave a guy. Like Brad obviously didn't say the right things to Sincere. Obviously didn't want him, but he obviously wanted Ty Rogers back in the fold, and he had to make that happen. And apparently he did. So I think, and again, who was ending the game against Iowa State? Ty Rogers was.
Mhm.
I think that Ty will definitely be in some final lineups if they needed some defensive stops to end the game. Let's keep going with some comments. Again, thank you for the comments, everyone. The Lonius Monk 69, is that Ionis Monk 69? Rez would have been better for talent, Ty better for the glue. I agree with that. I mean, he's an older guy, been with the system with Brad Underwood. I definitely think that this is a good trade for the Illini, regardless of what happens between Illinois and Michigan this upcoming season. He also goes to say, it just hit me that Ty's been a bit of a coach seemingly this year. So next year, he'll be much smarter and find ways to make it work. Yeah, I mean, offensively, that's his bugaboo that he needs to figure out. And I think he obviously um, will have a shot to figure it out this offseason. So I'm excited to see some tweets from Illini Media that's like, Ty Rogers in oven making threes. What's going to happen? like,
The
I
Illini social media team is going to be working overtime, throwing those him shooting videos out.
like you know how Bleacher Nation has like obsessive draft pick watch or obsessive Kyle Tucker watch. This one is going to be obsessive Ubben 3-pointer watch for the Illini basketball program. And finally, from the Alonis Monk 69, we love dicks. I mean, yes, we do. Yes, we do. Pause. I know, Alex. Pause. Major pause. But I think having a guy like Dix in this lineup just adds so much 3-point shooting that you can create some space if you get some drivers in the transfer portal like Sellers. It's just going to free up the paint so much where guys have to guard him from from the get-go. You can't just leave a guy like that open, and that's something that Illinois had for a couple games like Oregon, but in a lot of games you don't shoot in the 330th in the country for a reason. So I think having a guy like him is just massively important. Philip, Ty is the athlete and defender we needed. Absolutely. There were
Exactly.
so many moments where I was just craving that red shirt to be blown, but now I'm kind of glad that it didn't. Knowing that you still made the NCAA tournament and you won a game in the NCAA tournament, now you can push even further. Pat OD also says they didn't get to the line enough. I agree with that. It was a 3-pointer bust team. Coach Guthorpe, Tommy, Ty, Dix, Sellers, Boswell would be a nice starting five. I think that would be a great starting five, but I also think you are missing uh, Sar. That's still a name that could be the star of this Illini team, and we'll see if he's just too good and he'll go to the NBA or stay in the Barca League. But I think that's a legitimate possibility as well. Pat OD says he could have retained Hawkins, Danger, and Goody if he wanted to. But again,
Okay.
Luke was not that good at Indiana
Exactly.
comparatively.
No one is missing what Luke Goody did on the floor last season. Danger, I get what you're saying. Danger had a great season for Memphis, but Danger wouldn't have done that here at Illinois with the style of play that we played this past season. Hawkins and Illinois, it was obvious they were just going to go their separate ways, and Coleman Hawkins made $2 million, which in today's terms is like $8 million in today's salary
Yeah.
off season. So it's I get what you're saying, Pat. I'm just going to kindly disagree.
Philip again says should have kept Goody and Hawkins, and he continues on saying, but they got paid big time, absolutely, and Luke got to be in his hometown team. Um, Other things said in this chat, Coach Guthorpe, he said Riley, I don't think he'd have an issue sitting Sar. You're right. He did have Will Riley coming off the bench, but um, I think there would be opportunity for Sar to come in and compete for that starting lineup position. But yeah, there's a lot to happen still, Sonny, in this off season. I mean, uh, I don't know if we've seen the last portal entries from the Illini. I don't know if there's still going to be some major surprises in terms of targets for the Illini, but obviously there's a wide net being thrown for the Illini by Brett Underwood to bring talent in. And I'm glad that you have the assistant staff that you do in today's world of college basketball. Um, like as good as Chester Frazier was, he's not built for this style of recruiting that's taking place. I think you would like TA back in the fold, like in some sort of fashion, but that just wasn't meant to be. Obviously, Anderson had um, different expectations for things at the Illini, and he felt like he could utilize his time in a different way. But having Orlando Antigua with his domestic connections and his Caribbean connections, and then Jeff Alexander, the surprise of Europe. I would not have thought that he would have been the Mr. Worldwide recruiter that he has turned into. And I was calling for Jeff's head a while ago, and I am sure glad they didn't because he is exactly what the Illini need in this talent finding world that is college basketball.
For all his faults, and I acknowledge that Brad Underwood has many, I don't know if there's many coaches out there that can handle basically, hey, you have a clean slate every single year. Go build a roster. I don't know. There's five coaches out there who can do the job that Brad Underwood does every single year. Now, whether he reaches the ultimate expectations of what this program are, that again talks about what the faults are. But when you have Brad and you have Orlando Antigua, you know that they've got the connections, and they can put together a roster that can compete. Again, replacing 10 guys and all of a sudden you still win 22 games in a very solid Big Ten conference. I don't know how many coaches can do that.
You're right. I mean, I don't know in the amount of different ways that Illinois has won in college basketball, going from the Chicago recruiting area of Io DeSumo era to the let's try this big man in Kofi Coburn and see what we can build around him to actually making the NCAA tournament with that Matthew Meyer team that was just so dysfunctional and so toxic from start to finish, and then to be able to unleash a different style of offense during the Terrence Shannon Jr. run of booty ball and help with the help of Jay Wright and Tyler Underwood to this style right here of freshmen developing. And I know it wasn't as fast as we would like it to be, but he's done it in a gamut of different ways, and I'm kind of just so happy that we have a coach that has the ability to adapt, because if you don't adapt, you die in this world of college basketball.
Exactly. I think he basically needs to blend his two strategies from the past two seasons. It's not about get old, stay old. Yeah, let's get old, stay old, but let's also have that one superstar player, instead of. I think one of the downfalls of last season was not just the talent misfires on Hummerkaus and Kerry Booth, but to have Will Riley and Kasparis, two freshmen, be your two best players. I think that just put a lot of pressure on them. And you saw when those two had bad games and big moments, the team just wasn't able to perform. I think, for example, this upcoming year, if the Dame Sar rumors do come true and he comes into Champaign, and you can hopefully count on him to be a star, but he doesn't have to do it alone, because at that point he'll have a second year of Visic, he'll have a senior year Kylan Boswell, he'll have a technically fourth year but junior year Ty Rogers around him, and I just think that is probably the best recipe for the Illini.
And possibly another Avicic. So it could be Evi um, the plural of Avicic as well. So, and there's going to be some mystery guys out there. I think you still need that another shooting guard out there that can come off the bench. And I think you still need a more more muscular, physical kind of power forward in there that can grab boards and be a rim runner kind of style. So I think that's kind of all that you're missing if all of this does come true in one cohesive manner. I'm talking like Jalen Sellers, Dix, Ivasic, all coming in, and Sar. There is a massive way that this team can look older and feel older and yet still have some extremely good athleticism built in there. And I think that's the glue that you need to win in today's world of college basketball.
And again, it's not going to stop. Only what half our roster is put together right now. As you said, we still certainly have those holes. I agree. We need another rotational guard. I mean, imagine if something happens to Cotton Boswell right now. Like, who's going to be the main playmaker on this basketball team? I have no idea. You're going to need another rotational big. Even if Big Z comes here, as you said, we're going to need a 6'8", 6'9", just athlete, power forward who can be physical. Basically a Morez Johnson Jr. Well, obviously, we're not going to find him, but hopefully we can find a cheaper version, maybe an older version from a smaller league who wants to make a jump up.
Yeah, so let's get to those defections to kind of end the show with Trey White and Morez Johnson. Let's start out with Trey White. He is leaving the program. Kind of went through a lull in the middle of the season where he wasn't too much of a factor for the Illini. I think there was one game where he had 0 minutes played, and you were like, "Uh oh, what's going on here?" And then near the NCAA tournament time, he turned it on in a big way where you thought, "Okay, the ships are right. He'll be back." But apparently, he wanted a little bit more of a role on this roster next year and the ball in his hands. But I don't think you can promise anything on style of play in today's world of college basketball. I think that just sets you up for massive failure because in the middle of the season, that guy might transfer away.
It's just one of those like whether it's a fault or a good trait of Brad Underwood. He will be honest with you. And I was a big Trey White supporter last year. I constantly said that one disagreement I had with Brad was I thought Trey White was a very good college basketball player, and you should play very good college basketball players. But as you said, if the rumors are true that now that Will and KJ are moving on, that Trey wanted to be in that role, be one of the main focus points. I don't know if Trey White's game would translate to that level. I mean, he was one of the focal points for a Louisville team the year before, and they stunk. So I don't know if I think he's just more of a complementary piece. I absolutely wanted him back, but I wanted him back in the same role that he played at the end of this past season, not the role I think he's envisioning for himself because he probably wants to make a couple bucks at the professional level.
Yeah, I just hate that demands are a major factor in today's world of college hoops. I kind of wish it was like, hey, just play your role, and if you win, things will take care of themselves. And apparently, that's not the case anymore. So I really think that Trey White is going to try to go to a place where he can get the ball in his hands, and I think his bed will be made for him. And I don't think that's going to be in the positive sense. But let's talk about the massive loss that was Morez Johnson. He's actually committed to the University of Michigan. Whenever I first saw the news, it floored me because I thought he was like the everyday guy that Brad Underwood loved. But that was just a little shot of, hey, this is the new world of college hoops. You get used to it or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. This that was a shocker. Even as Illinois fans who are used to being shocked, this one was surprising for sure. But you know what, Morez and his team around him, obviously, they wanted to, at least in my opinion, get paid, and they got paid. I'm sure it's over a million and a half, whatever it is he ultimately got. Good for him. I'm shocked. This is not. I kind of said this on Lockdown Illini. What bothers me about Morez is not the player that we lost, even though he's a very good basketball player. He really has only one elite skill right now. I think I'm more upset with what we symbolically lost because Morez could have been that one guy, the program guy that we can prove that even in the modern era we can still have the Trent Frazier's, the Coleman Hawkins, guys who will stick here for 3-4 years and then move on to the next level. And when Morez decided to move on, that kind of ruined an idealistic idea that I had in mind.
Yeah, I want to get to this comment, and I'm in a hotel room in Normal, Illinois. But hope all is safe with the storm. Southern half of the state is getting hammered, absolutely. So hope all is well down there in the homeland. But yeah, I mean, looking at Morez, it just seems like his thoughts and his people's thoughts around him are so completely out of reality of who he is as a player. He is not a three-point shooter. He is not a guy that's going to dictate the offense. He is going to get paid in the NBA based on his rebounding ability, his ability to rim run, and then he'll develop that shooting later on near the back half of his NBA contract. I think teams would see that. You don't make the money by just jacking up 3-point shots, turning the ball over because you think you're a point guard, and then all of a sudden your draft stock falls to zilch because you know what? Michigan is going to use him the way that Illinois used him. That's the sneaky part that nobody is telling Morez. Dusty May is not going to be like, you know what? I know we just made a Sweet 16, but we can we can use you and you can shoot threes. We're going to be all good. No, it was the money that he was given from the University of Michigan and a lie. He is going to be a rebounder. He's going to be used on the block, and he is going to be like, "Well, I guess I'm getting paid now, so I can't be too unhappy." So I think that's the massive lie that Morez is being told, and Morez's family is being told at this very moment.
Coleman Hawkins wasn't very good his freshman year. In fact, a lot of Illini fans were ready to move on from Coleman, or at least wouldn't have shed tears if he had decided to move on. Moritz had a path here. I truly do believe that, if not next year, then at least by his junior year, he had all Big Ten potential. He would have become a national name, and if he'd stayed all 4 years, he could have been an All American type of talent. But his game could have progressed. The fact that he wants to completely pull a 180. As you said, I think it's just money and lies, but I guess that's kind of the state of college athletics nowadays anyway. So how surprised can I really be?
New title of this podcast: Illini Cast, College Basketball Lies. I think this is a fascinating offseason. The prices are going through the roof with revenue sharing coming into play. I think this is the major category 5 hurricane of college athletics right now. And I think with the new settlement stuff, I think then we'll see it start to calm down. But now we're in this wild wasteland right now. So I think this is just the way it is for this offseason. And I think that next year we'll get a little bit more in control just because of revenue sharing and collectives being a little less part of the process. So hopefully this is the last year of the wild, wild west, but maybe that's just me trying to be optimistic.
Hopefully, because again, it's hard to watch. At least in the NBA, as a Bulls fan, I know the players are going to be there every year, especially as the Bulls fans, because AK just doesn't trade anybody, and I may not like the players, but at least I know if I buy a jersey, that jersey's going to apply 3 seasons later. At the college level, that's just not the case anymore for me. I've made a promise to myself. I'm going to go ahead and purchase a Ty Rodgers jersey just because of what he symbolizes coming back. But at this point on, that'll probably be the last jersey I buy for a very long time.
Yeah, I bought a Will Riley jersey. I feel pretty good about that because I know he'll be like a first round pick. So it's not like he's moving on to a different college. So I can feel good about that. And you know what? I'll probably buy every first round Illini jersey in the NBA. That's kind of going to be my thing now. So probably get 2 of them this year and then see what happens in years future. But I have a Terrence Shannon jersey and I have an Io DeSumo jersey. So I kind of want to
They're NBA jerseys or they're Illinois jerseys?
NBA jerseys.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, so I think that's gonna be my new thing. And then, of course, once Ty is in his senior year, definitely gonna grab that one. But yeah, college jerseys. Let's set a standard here. All Illini fans, all college basketball fans, quit buying college basketball jerseys of players for NIL because it's just stupid. It doesn't mean anything. It's pointless. It's a pointless exercise. So let's try that as a challenge and see if it corrects some behavior from these college kids. But that is the end of our time here at Illini Cast. I want to thank you all for watching. Thank you for commenting. We have had a lot of comments today's episode, so I appreciate all of you tuning in. But like, share, and subscribe here on Illini Cast. And again, we're part of the Armchair Illini Network, so like and share those guys on all various social media platforms. Written work they are phenomenal at. They have every massive news story as it happens and analysis on those news stories, both football, basketball, and university and Big Ten wide. So a lot of good stuff coming. And then for the Linecast, we're going to do a lot of interviews here coming up as the off season is begun. So be on the lookout for those interviews. And of course, we got a lot of roster spots available. So every time somebody joins in, we will be having a recap on that signing for the Illini. So this has been the Illini Cast, part of the Armchair Illini Network. And again, prayers to all of you for going through these storms here in the state of Illinois. So hopefully your property's fine, but more importantly, I hope you are all safe. So this has been Illini Cast, part of the Armchair Illini Network. Sonny, thank you again.
Of course, IL.
I and I.